Beautiful. Thank you kindly. So yes. Welcome, Andrej. Everybody here with us today that may have missed some of these details around how we can use some of the system design models that we're taking from indigenous modes research and combine it and use it with the tooling that we've seen emerge from Haas from the development side. And a lot of what the tooling from Haas in terms of the consensus flow, the formal proposals, active issues channels, and what's going on in there is very informed by these models that we've yet to dive deeply into with a lot of the advocates that aren't with us weekly or time zone wise or what have you. So thank you kindly everybody who's been able to make it today, or whoever can watch this recording as well. But what we've been talking about in those sessions is very model focused or system design focused, and getting into some of the functional mechanisms of autonomy, as we've been saying, or distributed power, bottom up systems design, horizontal systems design, all these different synonyms, right? And today we want to focus that around the tooling, so we can see the way that the tooling was considering these models when being developed. And we can go over the tooling for folks who may be seeing what's going on in those channels, but may not know what's going on under the hood. Some of the open source background that some of the tooling comes from, maybe even. And then we can get into some of the models that we can layer on top, right? And I think everybody here is fairly familiar with what we're trying to do clan design wise, right? In terms of a three-tiered clan design, very much directly from this dialogue with Indigenous Council, the Longhouse, and how it can attach core values, right, that are important to sustain long term, while also bringing in new ideas from newcomers into a given system or ecosystem, without one drowning out the other, right? And we've managed to be able to attach, right, core values around certain traits of turtle, wolf, and bear. And I think today we'll start to see how that starts to influence the streamlining of decision making and distributed power of all voices, and then distributed power between even female and male decision making in the long term, which I think is all the above can make us a fairly unique DAO, in terms of governance, which is something that originally inspired us, but some of the tooling like MetaGov, some of the other research that we do around Dada, the Dada Working Group, is very much inspired by Primavera de Filippi's work, which we may have heard us mention her name in some of the documentation or some of these sessions. And it's around long-term distributed power to accompany decentralized architecture like we see with Stacks or Web3 architectures. And this really speaks to that can't be evil notion, slogan, right? That was a big part of the branding, back in the day for Blockstack, right? But also, speaks to the warnings of Primavera against the concentration of power and wealth that can defeat the purpose of these distributed systems in the long term if we don't figure it out and take it seriously. And one of the places that she points to are indigenous modes, right, in terms of pointing other people in terms of research in this area to be able to figure this out, to actually do what accompanied that warning, which is a positive outlook of what's possible, right, in terms of a new socioeconomic order, right, bottom up, horizontal, in terms of power distribution, right. And so, this is a lot of the details we'll be getting into how to achieve this today. So this is exciting, to say the least, for us. It's been a long time coming since originally hearing Primavera say this back in 2018. And now we're using tooling that she's very much a part of, whether it's MetaGov project, which includes Harvard, Oxford, and others, research group, or some of the work that we plan to do with Dada coming up later this week that wraps around this tooling as well, which we'll probably get to another day. Or folks are going to be welcome to join us as well in that meeting, part of the horizontality and the upskilling network that we hope to bringing to the incentives of Advocates DAO as well. But I'll shut up soon. Maybe I'll pass it to Haas to touch on some of the tooling for Andres. I don't know. We'll ask you maybe before we pass it to Haas how familiar you are with what's been going on in active issues and formal proposals. There's been some recent changes in recent weeks, integrations of different types of tooling, and we'll start with going under the hood of those channels if you'd like. I think you may be one of the amongst some of the few folks that could use that deeper dive here, but I just want to double check because I may be presuming too much.
Yeah, so I'm not very familiar with that yet, so I think we sharing today will be very helpful.
Yes, beautiful. So I'll give a brief intro and then I'll pass it to Haas as soon as I can. I don't know if Haas is still with us, actually. Let me see. Maybe we can ping him back. I don't know. Or maybe he needed the break. But I can briefly go over what's going on right under the hood of those channels. And largely it's this tooling called Policy Kit that comes out of the MetaGov project that I mentioned Primavera is at the helm of. And it's this Policy Kit that Haas has been hacking away at for some time after many hours of trying to wrap his head around what I'm talking about in these models for bottom-up systems design. And what Policy Kit essentially allows us to do is go beyond what comes default in the settings of a given client, like a Discord or even a Discourse or other types of clients, right? Even comment sections of particular websites where you have this default of a benevolent dictator, so to speak, something that apparently has a legacy in open source for some reason, right? And what Policy Kit does is allow for some wrapping around any of these clients to customize, beyond those default moderation toolings, right? And even go into policies that have certain triggers, date and time triggers. Can impact actions, can impact documents that get uploaded as official policy documents, right? Official positions and things like this. And then there's even a near chain integration that already exists for Policy Kit that we can hopefully make fairly Stacks native soon, right? Or semi-Stacks native, or whatever it's going to be. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll take 2 minutes and be back. Let me know anyway if what I can support you.
Yeah. Okay, I'll pass it back to you in 2 minutes. Beautiful. Yeah. How's your
life? My break.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah, I figured. Yeah. How's your hopefully be able to give us a nice demo as well, Andres, of what's been going on there. A little bit more concretely, maybe. Share the screen around the server we're already in. It would be nice. But that's a little bit of a background of what's been going on in terms of under the hood of those channels. And originally, we had a little less going on in these channels. It was just very minimal implementation of Policy Kit and the tooling that was possible. We hadn't, for example, included what we've been wanting for a while now, which is bottom-up quorums, right? Windows of time, so that, particularly for us across time zones, I'm not sure where you are right now, but it becomes very, very apparent to us that how important asynchronous dialogue is going to be, and asynchronous consensus. And we want to engender as much real-time consensus as much as possible through these protocols and sessions like this, but focused on decision-making. We want to try to do that as much as possible, but whenever we can't, we want to have robust tooling that ensures the different types of legitimacy that you see in real-time meetings, like actually seeing somebody or knowing somebody's there, small things like that. And you can see that in what's been included in the tooling now. Because now not only do we have these windows of time, thanks to folks like Hero giving us some ideas around displaying the window of time left to participate in dialogue and to participate in dissent. In terms of decision making or voting, so to speak, for lack of a better term, because as a tangent here, you'll notice that what's been a part of the tooling all along, even in its more simple implementations, is this opportunity for consensus, as opposed to majority splitting folks into different positions with majority vote before you get a chance to come to consensus. And this is one of the fundamental mechanisms that we came directly from the indigenous dialogue that we have in our research, right from the Longhouse to Haas, actually, in one of our sessions. And Haas has stayed true to this implementation, and you'll see it even in these more robust examples that will be demoed for you shortly. And so, in addition to the windows of time, we have these the eyeball emojis or any other type of emoji, if I'm not mistaken, that to acknowledge that you're at least participating or at least seeing the thread, right? And like I said, these mechanisms for legitimizing participation will get more robust as we get more familiar with the tooling, and we can implement more as we go. And this is all open for suggestion and changes from the folks that are using it. Of course, a big part of the true horizontality, right, and bottom-up system design that we hope to encourage here. So this is a big part of what's going on in the tooling thus far. And as I mentioned, there'll be changes, hopefully, inspired by you guys. But let's have Haas, since he's back, show you what's been going on a little bit more clearly, hopefully.
Yeah, sorry, y'all. Been eating a lot of yogurt. But yeah, we can definitely start with the consensus flow. It's the intentions behind it is just like to come around to consensus around a certain issue. The tooling is just assisting that culture, not guiding it. This applies to every tooling that we develop. A demo of that tooling is gonna start right now. Let's see. Okay. So the governance starts from simple issue text. This is, I think, most exemplified in here. The initial issue text was that the current treasury needs at the moment rewards at the moment are around 800 STS, which is, I think, was 2 weeks ago. And I was thinking that send half of what is the treasury and so on. This is like a simple. This is a simple issue description. It always starts with like the simplest thing. This is not an official thing. You should never think of it as an official thing, or that it needs some format, because there is no format with this. It was just me doing some Discord magic with the text after editing the text of this message through the discussion that happened in this thread. I think a few of you have participated here. You see here, I think Werner and Friedker has contribute so much to the to this discussion. But it's also about the discussion, the journey of finding consensus, of finding a solution together, and then like implementing it, which happened the last two distributions. Right now, you can see that I'm the only person who's posting like these issues, and I think that's just like based on picking up the issues through the community discussions. One of them was the XBDC payout that Friedker had opened discussion, then we moved it to the formal process. But that's basically the work of the Wolf rep. That that this is not like my position, or there's no positions here right now. It's like this is an open space for people to open issues and find consensus, or basically what we call a collective position on that issue. Ryder asked, why did you remove so many people from the thread? Yes, the reason for this is that so that the bot itself added these people to the thread as participants and gave them the right to dissent, but the right to dissent is only granted through participating in the discussion or reacting with this reaction. You can even see when voting started, or when the dissent period started, it added both Merrick and Harold, who were the only people who were not involved in this discussion, to the list for people who are in the thread. And then dissent started informal proposals right here. So I think that's like a small demo. Just post a message, whatever message, in this channel. But I would recommend that we do it in open discussion first, so that this does not get overpopulated with issues that you can't keep track of it. Open discussion, I think, is a better place, which something that we discussed during the design, that all these channels being the well, or where we gather the issues. We're just like reaching for issues there and then opening these issues in active issues. So this is part of the formal process for opening an issue. Opening an issue, also working through an issue, includes doing some education. It includes doing some math to resolve that issue, by the people who are responsible for different parts of the different responsibilities within the DAO or within the advocates community. Like myself, I manage the SourceGrid instance, and Friedker, who distributes the funds. So this is basically this. Since you can sense the room that there is not a strong disagreement around the issue itself, you can just move ahead with actually implementing the solution. And since we're in a trustful, we started doing that today. Since we're in a trustful community, it's easy to do that. We're not breaking any rules, because if there is still strong dissent, then we're gonna talk through it and walk through these issues together. But that's basically like the flow itself. These tools, the code that is involved here, it doesn't do a lot. It just like opens a discussion and allows some periods for people to dissent and some periods for people to discuss and so on. It just facilitates, does not guide, and this has been our philosophy. Any questions?
For me, that was clear, so thank you for the overview. So I understand that anything what is in the open discussion can then be formed into issue, and after all, it gets into formal proposal. I think that's all clear. Thank you.
You got it. One thing that I think I missed is that formal proposals is a formality. We act on the action, the issue during the time of deliberation and discussion. As I said, it's a feeling. The tool should help us just log the positions that the DAO has on these issues, but not guide us in terms of like, should we execute now? Should we execute when we get the formal proposal passing? It's not that. It's always going to be the deliberations, the discussions, the culture stuff, using these tools, not the other way around. I wanted to make that clear. Just the formal proposals is just a directory of all the positions that the DAO has, on the issues that were presented.
I'm wondering how that can be ensured, or what motivates that, or what processes or culture combined with the tooling will ensure that, because I'm sure everyone understands that if you get a tool, like, people are going to use it, how they use it. And so I want to also give space. I saw you, I can't say your name, Andrzej. I saw you unmute again, so this might be a discussion that leads us in like more of a clan system direction, maybe. And I just don't want to lose, your thought if it was different from mine. But I'd love to loop back to like, how can we ensure this thing that you want to happen, Haz, with these tools, as opposed to not acting or executing until something's formalized,
Yeah, I think I can speak to a little bit to that too. I wanted to pick up on that. You guys may have noticed I was used the word "well" in there in a very slick way to describe how you gather the voices in these other channels, whether it's open discussion or anywhere else that the channel has to, any other channel that this discussion pops up in. And this is, I think, the beginning to the answer to your question. Ryder, which does start to touch more into the system design flow, and like you said, the culture that we want to engender, that hopefully this very intentional clan design, right, guides us, and helps us to achieve, right, and so. For example, Wolf Clan, right, is not just the name of a clan, right? There's some of you, hopefully all of you know by now. We're actually trying to speak to these deeper functions that folks identify with themselves, or other folks identify them as, and inform how they identify themselves. This deep function that folks participate in, or play, or the way that they engage with the ecosystem, where they view themselves engaging with the ecosystem and the systems design, particularly of the advocates. And so we've asked folks to think about this deeply, particularly thinking about their intrinsic motivations when thinking about this, not just particular actions that they're doing that may correlate with the clans, but to try to identify with some of the traits based on some of the the internal motivations folks have, passions, or what we were calling hidden capital, right? From what may be your very individual circumstances or background, right? And this is a very important inventory taking that then makes for a critical function in gathering issues for decision-making flows and consensus flows. So the wolves, for example, are always moving, part of their traits, right? Their function is to gather the minds, right, as the well in the indigenous context language, right? And this is a fundamental point of accessibility to commons in the indigenous context. Somebody who has the birthright to indigenous land, or somebody who's just a visitor that's under the protection of the particular territory, everybody has this access, right? To have their voices being heard in the heart of the council, of the longhouse, right? And so that indigenous context can help inform us about the function of access in horizontal bottom-up systems design, the function of autonomy in that access in terms of shifting paradigms away from scarcity, competition, self-preservation, and towards regenerative abundance, mutual aid for the long term, and bring these incentives into the foreground. This is a fundamental element. And so this is what is being thought about in the tooling in active issues. And the way that this process is achieved, to get to the details and answer to Ryder's question, is that when we have a representative selected, hopefully very soon after a few more sessions like this, and actual use of the tooling in these models, the Wolf Clan representative is responsible, right? These are folks that opt into a whole lot of responsibility to the collective, right? The most responsibility. And they're selected by the collective, to do the things that we would expect of the best of us, right? In terms of dedication, time, in governance particularly. And we know that not everybody is going to be interested in governance, in system design, and so, this is the things that we would consider when selecting, right? Also, selecting folks obviously that we trust, right? To pick up the type of issues that we expect to get picked up, right? And so this is really at the heart of the answer to your question, right? Is that whenever you can see issues being picked up or presented in a way that aren't conducive to the way that the issues were brought up, or the way that the minds were gathered, or there's something missing, or I don't know, all the different angles that can come up. The collective is supposed to have the power to remove that title from that Wolf Clan representative. And there are two Wolf Clan representatives, both male and female, right? As a reminder, not just of the balance in power between female and male power distribution, but also our whole matrilineal heritage to ecosystems and beyond, right? And so all of this is obviously considered in other core values of open source, of privacy, of the other things that come with Web3, and whether it be specific to clarity contracts and stacks, or other specific to stacks things. Like, what are the other ethos or core values that we expect that Wolf Clan to understand when picking up issues, or paying attention or not paying attention to issues that would do good to the collective, to have minds gathered around it, right? And to pick it up and have it initiated into this active issues channel. And right now, this isn't the case because we don't have explicit representation yet. This is something that's going to have to come from us being able to identify the best of us in this system. And that's an extremely important part here to the process, and your answer, hopefully, too, Ryder. So thank you, Colin, for enduring that long answer. Hopefully it makes some kind of sense. And we'll get into more details around that, I'm sure, as we go. I think Haas said something else in addition to well that I'll touch on if you don't have a response immediately here, right? But thank you for the question. It's extremely important and brought right into system design, which is what hopefully can be the core of this session. So thank you kindly, Ryder.
I have a question.
Yes, yes.
I see that the active issues is where the community is going to bring the issues of concern, or where it will be posted that there's a potential issue for debate, and then potentially for a proposal or a formal proposal, depending on what structure is used. So this is a tactical question for advocates, which is, should advocates be checking those active issues on a regular basis to see what's coming up, or will there be some kind of notification created in the future so that we know that there's an issue on board that people are discussing, and that every advocate is aware of the active issue? Thanks.
No, thank you kindly, Julia. One of the things that we learned from the indigenous context is, while not everybody is going to be interested in the business of governance or systems design as an all-day, everyday thing, which you would expect of the representatives, or another important function, which you maybe think of the subheads, right, or the sub-representatives that help each representative with their work. So work like gathering the minds, or pointing to issues that maybe should be picked up, right? And put into active issues, right? From outside of active issues, somewhere in the server. And your question around how attentive should people be, right? I think the answer is very attentive, right? Because although you don't have the responsibility of a representative, right? As an all-day, everyday thing, your participation in consensus is the use of your voice, right? Now, every issue may not be relevant to you, so you don't use your power in that particular instance. But whenever an issue is relevant to you, it's important that we have paths carved in our system design for you to be able to use your voice. And so participation in those active issue threads and the dialogue going on in those active issue threads, it should be, even more than encouraged in terms of the type of culture we want to engender, right? I don't know what's more than encouraged, but like a lot of encouragement in terms of participation and attentiveness to that particular channel, especially wherever the dialogue happens before that channel too. But especially when it gets to that channel, to your point, maybe we have more than the notification or the turning white of the channel or the pings to the folks that may be involved in the issue right off the bat. Maybe we want to amplify it some other way, but this is the type of questions that will to get us to that implementation. So thank you. I don't know if any folks have any ideas to answer this directly beyond myself. Besides, what immediately comes to my mind is the Amplify channel, but that could get choppy, I'd imagine, in terms of anytime in the future we have a lot of issues. I know Haas has thought about this a little bit already. So I'll open up the floor. Thank you kindly, Juliet.
Also can speak to that. Mostly the issues mention those who are going to be impacted by them, and the pings themselves are like not. There aren't a lot of pings for like Stacks Advocate, and but there is like some pings for like potentially like individuals or groups in the active issue message.
One of the reasons I raised this was because I saw that there was a question regarding XBTC, and I didn't know about it until today. and not that that does matter for me for this context in the advocates program, but it was also something I was looking in Krieger's pool. So it was an issue for me as an advocate, but not an issue for me right now as a resident. But I was concerned that I didn't know there was this discussion. So that is why I bring this up. So whether it is a requirement for each individual advocate to go in there and take a look at what the active issues are so that they know what's going on. And there are many issues that happen around the Stacks ecosystem. I saw one today that was raised about centralization and use of Discord. And so those are things, I guess, that we can all bring to this active issues. And I think I'm wondering if there is a particular focus on what should be put in active issues. Because I don't know if really the centralization question that I saw today, which I think is important, really matters for advocates as much as matters for everyone in the Stacks ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I can directly respond to. I imagine that everybody has a response to that, though. Potentially, it's a pretty general question, right? And it's a question. We're all generators of value in this particular advocates DAO. So, but my immediate response is, those type of issues and consider broader ecosystem issues is not can't be a bad thing. And I think that advocates is definitely a part of the Stacks ecosystem, so it's going to be related somehow, some way. And it's an example of that wolf work. That doesn't just mean the wolf representative, even though the wolf representatives and subheads are the ones that have opted into the responsibility of picking up the issue and placing it in active issues. Once this is all flowing together in terms of the model and the tooling, it's not the case right now. The case right now is, it's open, because there's no representatives. So, the question around what issues should be picked up is very much wrapped up in the grasp of the system design, the grasp of the broader ecosystem of that Wolf Clan representative, right? Maybe these are some of the things we want to consider when considering a Wolf Clan representative, right? In terms of the type of issues that might or may not get picked up and put into active issues, when active issues is a much more restricted place once these explicit structures are there, which should obviously be a big help for scaling this in the long term, but not so much a problem as we're just getting used to the tooling. But thank you kindly, Julia. I hope I'm not forgetting anything else that you mentioned there. Let me know if
No, thank you. That really helped. What you just, that last bit that you just said really helped answer my questions. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, don't let it just be my voice respond to Juliet. If the folks have ideas on anything that Juliet or House just said, please.
I've been thinking about it, and there's either a lot of trust or a different way to do the timings of things. I'm just thinking about there's that 5-day descent period right now, right? So I'm watching and I'm like, man, I have to be checking in here every 5 days. 2 days?
2 days descent.
2 days.
But 5 days for deliberation.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, actually, that's okay. So yeah, 5 days of deliberation, and then followed by the 2 days of a possible descent period. So 7 days. So there's 7 days I gotta be checking in every 7 days to make sure that there's nothing going by that I don't agree with, or I have to trust the wolf representative to be able to bring whatever's needed to the floor, kind of, or to bring it up and raise issue with it, take issue, or it's for my voice to be fully represented, I have to check in every 7 days, right, minimum, right? really every 5 days if I want the chance to be part of the deliberation, and really every day if I want to be part of the active everything. And I'm looking at my future life, and it's like, if I'm relying on this thing and I want to take a 2-day vacation away from technology, or 2 weeks, sorry, like I want to take 2 weeks and I want to be walking into the woods. There's no signal out there, and I don't want to bring a Starlink backpack thing, right? If I want to go like off grid for 2 weeks, right, and then come back and check in that 7 days, if something could have gone by, right? Which I don't know. I've just been thinking about that kind of scenario. Now, I don't really have any more of a question or a comment around it. I don't know if anyone has ideas around that. It's just something I've been thinking about a lot, right?
I'm sorry, but I have to go. Can you take over, Harold?
No, of course.
I'll be back.
Okay.
For like 10 minutes or something.
No, of course. Thank you, Colin Merrick. No, it's a good question. And it kind of dovetails with the last question, right, around Juliet, the response to Juliet around how attentive we all should be. And this collective responsibility we all have, even if it's not the ultimate responsibility of representing the collective like that representatives opt into after, consensus selects them. And so, the response to Juliet was, we all still have this collective responsibility. And, hopefully, right, the consistent participation in the dialogues, in the issues that did pertain to you, you can kind of feel, when you can step away safely, right? Because how likely is it that, an issue that pertains to you pops up in this amount of time after so many issues that pertain to you just passed, right? Maybe it's just a feel thing, I don't know. But I think it's, the responsibility is much heavier on the representatives to ensure that, maybe this is maybe one of the more hidden or nuances of representatives or the community's responsibilities to each other, knowing, right? Maybe I was like, maybe Merrick would be interested in this, so let me try to consider from his perspective if I can, or ping him at some kind of way before things get too far along in the dialogue, right? But it's an interesting question, right, about the nuances of responsibilities to the collective, and when it is, especially because in this instance it's connected to technology that we may want to, plug out of at some point, right? In the indigenous context where we're learning a lot of these models from, it's not necessarily the case, right? But yeah, it's a good question. But also, what your question made me think of as important for this session is that this is all still customizable by y'all and us right together. These are arbitrary times that are selected because there's not a use of the clan system yet. But when the clan system is being used, the collectives of those clans, right, respectively, right, are going to have to come up with what works for them across their very particular time zones that are subject to change with newcomers, or, and maybe this will, have an organic fix to the question that you're asking in ways that we can't name right now. But hopefully that we see, pretty drastic changes to these starting numbers that are just placeholders to get people familiar with what's possible with the tooling more than a standard being set. This is a fluid thing, not a static thing.
You saying it that way makes me think. I think I have things that I want to build on top of what's already here, or not on top of, but along with what's already here, and like tying in with automated scheduling stuff too. We'll have stuff to plug in. That's the beauty of it. Is it's all like small modular pieces, and it's just how do we plug them together. But yeah, the tooling that so far is it blows my mind. It's incredible, and happy to hear more about it. Thanks. And like be playing with it. It's like really nice to use. I wanted to say because I wrote that stuff about XBTC, right? Because I came across it and I'm like, I don't really know what that is. and I went to like look into it. I'm like looking at Anchorage, right? And I'm looking through this like board of directors, and I'm like, whoa, man, I don't, you know, I want to have containers around how I interact with this thing, right? And I felt like I was able, by just talking about it a little bit in that discussion thread, I was able to get deeper into it and hear a bit from Freaker about like how it's like, I love like appreciating the amount of work that he's done, right? So it's like I appreciated how that discussion felt a lot different from how it would have felt as a vote, right? It's like it gets us, allows us to drill in deep, and that's something I really enjoyed about it so far, just as a reflection on what Juliet brought up and the system design. Check.
I'm holding a couple of things. First off, something I heard from just the end of what you said, Merrick, that I really liked was something about the educational aspect of the dialogue, as opposed to like what I see often or what I've seen in people trying to use consensus without doing it is like competitive. Like, well, why do you want that? And that's like really different. Like, prove to me that your idea is worthy, and then I will consent to it. Like that's not what we're going for. That's not what we see here. Like so far, like organically, just something that I'm feeling. So I got that educational vibe from you, and that's like feels really telling. And then also that it makes total sense to me that this tool would arrive and immediately be used for treasury matters, because, excuse me, those are the types of things that it's typically one person, maybe two people who are kind of like doing those actions, and we already have that being recognized with a 2% like attribution, which is really dope because that often goes by the wayside. But also those decisions kind of get made behind closed doors just for lack of having conversation, or in this case, tooling. So I thought it was just a great example, and I'm just also not confused that would be some of the first conversations in a healthy ecosystem that would come to that tooling and come to consensus over that tooling. So I really appreciate that. What I wanted to talk about in the group and have as many perspectives on as possible is something about the content of proposals, like what Juliet was talking to and what Haas and Harold spoke to. But I feel like I often see people say, like, I want more of this, and it's like they're saying that because they want to see it, and they may not have the skills to do it themselves, or even the time, or like it's not their skill set, or like they're actually just not that motivated to do it themselves. They want someone else to do it. Like, I don't know. There's all kinds of reasons, but I wonder if if that's appropriate, I guess. If someone's like, I propose that we do this. It's like I've seen in communities this get into, it's like a joke in housing cooperatives, like, who's we? And it's just like how clear do we want to be about, are we proposing that something from this purely ideation standpoint, like we think it's a good idea, or what part do we want to play in it as the person who's writing the proposal, or like do we feel like as a community we have boundaries around the person proposing, like what part they play in it. I'm just curious about that, especially when I think about like a wolf rep, or when I think of the work I've done in the past in other communities where I'm like just all over the channels all the time and kind of have an idea of people's positionality, and I'm like, oh, like there's some consensus happening, like I want to bring this to another place so people can talk about it and deliberate, without it getting lost in the channels. And then I'm trying to bring that conversation to fruition, but I'm not trying to take responsibility for it, or for even like the tasks therein. I'm just like, I see that the six of y'all all talked about this in separate spaces. I want to bring you together, so different example, the same thing. I wonder if this resonates for anybody, or if anyone has opinions on this.
Well, I'd say immediately that the few sentences that you said there are spot on to, the responsibilities of the subhead and the wolf rep, in terms of, the way you're gathering the issues, right? You're always moving, and you see what you just described, right? In terms of maybe what might be disparate conversations or similar conversations happening in different places, and then you know that these would be good minds to gather, right? Or maybe you see something that pertains to an entire clan, for example. And so this is a part of disseminating the information where it needs to go, right? After an issue has been picked up, and it should be the way that it's looked at precisely the way you described it there at the end, in terms of gathering the minds, and not necessarily being responsible for seeing seeing it through every step of the way. Not you don't even have the skill set, so this is why you do gather the minds that are the skill set, right? And so I think you spoke to it perfectly in terms of the function of the well, or wolf clan. Right? And it's not just the subheads and the representative, it's anybody who identifies with that particular trait. And you just have varying levels of responsibility, right? But even folks that don't identify as Wolf Clan, right, temporary Wolf Clan in this system, can, maybe they're just a slower wolf, right? Sometimes I feel like that's how I tend not to forget things even a month ago. So if they resonate, and I'll try to pick it up eventually, but that may not be the best trait of a wolf, right? A slow wolf or something like that. But no, thank you kindly, Ryder, for what was it, clarifying comment and question. But I'll leave the floor open too for anything else that this may open up.
So, what are we? Just one point, I guess. Because I'm more like a trial and error guy, like testing things. So I guess like we would love to like test it a lot. Maybe it's like a mock issue, like a fake issue, but we're figuring out the process more definitively via testing repeatedly. I think that could be an option, just to mention it. And the other thing I had in mind was when I think I might have asked you this before, but like these are reserved for like important issues, right? It's not just like some trivial stuff. And just how is that it? And when would we be expecting to have many of these type of issues coming through in the future?
No, all good questions. I'll try to start with the first one, and it's a big part of this session. I'm glad you asked, right, in terms of the next steps around combining not just we're combining the tooling, right, with the models for the first time, and having some, like you're saying, some mock issues that are just important enough to have some legitimate consensus around, because that's a big part of the tooling too, is having some legitimate consensus, and that I don't think you can necessarily test that in conventional ways. And so there are things though that make for good issues like this, whether it be the treasury type of issues, right, that we've already seen without the models attached to the tooling. But there's still some things that we can do, whether it's treasury related or whether it's code of conduct related, in terms of iterating on what's already there, and trying to include as many voices as possible. Right? These are all things that are, you can say are legitimate, but still mock issues in the sense that they're not necessarily organically coming up in terms of open discussion or somewhere else in the server. So that's your first question. Your other questions around the important issues, right? Is a good question as well, because a big part of this flow is the bulk of consensus happening in active issues in respective clans. So, right, as of now, with the demo from Haas, right, was, what we're seeing how the tooling can work without clans. But the clan system is our bridge work to system design, bottom-up system design. And when you're using this together with the tooling, the important issues will go into formal consensus, whether it's real time or in dialogue, text dialogue, right? Because while the bulk of consensus happens in the preliminary or what would be active issues in the respective clans, right? This is what I was referring to in terms of how the time windows of time will undoubtedly change once there's a model, the system design model attached to the tooling, because there's going to have to be real time and asynchronous dialogue in respective clans that are all using this tooling the way that they want to use it. And that's a beautiful thing, about what Merrick mentioned about the modularity of it all, right? And I think Haas did that very intentionally from our discussions. And so, there will be issues that are important enough to go into those different real-time meetings or asynchronous thread dialogues, right, in respective clans. And there will be issues that are not relevant to a particular clan. Or maybe they're only relevant to a few individuals in a respective clan, right? And so this is all wolf rep work and subhead work. It's a lot of work if you think about it, right? But it's distributed a little bit between the subhead and the wolf rep, and just help distribute it all the way through the whole clan in terms of the people that carry that trait. And so it's interesting, way that the responsibility fractals out too. But the smaller issues, right, maybe don't make it to those meetings because they get nipped in the bud. In the dialogue of active issues in a respective clan, and it gets included as maybe an announcement in the actual formal coming togethers of the clan, both male and female, right? Because again, the use of this tooling is also going to be an autonomous female and male decision-making processes that are informed about what's happening in each other while it's happening throughout a given time period. But they don't come together until the formal, and there's the minimal deliberation there. So that's where we see streamlining, not just between male and female, but for whole ecosystems and just regenerative design in general, right? This acknowledgement of the importance of this long-term, right, for long-term sustainability. And so, this is a long-winded answer to your question, I think, Hiro, but hopefully it starts to answer it, right? Because whether it's short announcements in the formal things that have already been sussed out, right, for the smaller issues that have already been sussed out, or we have a smaller issues channel, or there's something in active issues that represents, what's been happening in whatever respective clans, right? I can see that is a fairly transparent thing in and of itself for the smaller issues. But I hope that answers your question. Myself and Haas talked about this a lot during the spec design as well. And I think this is some of the things that we mentioned in discussion, right? Whether it be the small issues turning into announcements, or being addressed in a separate place or in active issues. But it's all open to your voices as well in terms of what you think should happen, right? And if you're already thinking about it, especially. But yeah, I think this is a good question to get a sense of what's happening flow-wise, right, in the context of the plan system model. It's just very different than the way the tool is being used now.
We kind of talked about yesterday right?
Oop, you breaking up a little bit. You said something about yesterday?
I think my computer is overheating.
Coming through good.
I said, yeah, like a little bit all related to the stuff you were talking about yesterday. Kind of similar topic, but now it's more like how we can apply that and use it in a modern way with technology.
Yeah, and one of the things that got us excited is, how relevant this is for across time zone work, right? It's literally impossible sometimes to meet. So again, thank you, Andres, for sticking it out with us this long. I know you've been here just over an hour. Unless there's anything else folks have to say about some of these recent topics, I'd like to, take a look at what's in the meeting chat here. When it comes to this diagram around the formal consensus flow. Before that, actually, we might do well to look at one of these flow charts that came before it as well. 1 second. Okay. I'm going to repost these just so they're accessible for folks. And hopefully this can clarify some of the flow beyond my convoluted speech. But yeah, if you guys take a look at what's going on in some of these diagrams in the chat, especially the most recent one posted, you can see what we're trying to describe in terms of the preliminary consensus phase, that is the active issues in the context of the systems design model being laid on top of the tooling. And this is what you don't see with the tooling right now in the demo that Hal showed you. But what you do see is some of the effect of streamlining of as many voices as possible, where there's this window for consensus and then a formalizing of that consensus, where you hopefully 9 times out of 10 you don't need real deliberation because most of the consensus has happened in the preliminary phase. So you see that in active issues right now. Right, and this is what Haas was trying to articulate, I believe, when saying, it's, pretty much for transparency, or, the sentence usually, not supposed to be used, right, unless in the one case where, there needs to be deliberation even, you'll see in the actual flow of the formal council, why even dissent shouldn't happen after that, because there's these mechanisms for sending the issue back if it doesn't, if it's not valid against collective core values and such. So,
Harold,
yeah.
does that mean that the tooling doesn't fully represent that flow? Because it sounds like it can operate. I mean, I right now I see the option of editing the original proposal message, which encourages, but it's just up to the author to do that, or dissent and then writing a new proposal. Otherwise, it's not in the flow to go back, like you said.
Oh no! It's in the system design. You're right. It's not in the tooling. This is something that can only be achieved with the models and the tooling, as you mentioned, and all the insights to these indigenous modes. The dialogue with these indigenous council that has let us know, right, what's going on protocol-wise. Because this is what these models are, right? They're actually protocols for organization, protocols for streamlining bottom-up voices, and so. Yeah, consensus, like you said, can be done in a lot of different ways, and I think these protocols are what keep those way. It's not a dogmatic approach to the consensus, but there's definitely some very well tested guardrails, right? That have infinite space in between. So I think there's an important, pattern to recognize in what you often hear me refer to fractal design, right? Where things can actually get smaller, but there's actually more space in the creases, right? And so, this is a good question, though, Ryder, around the differences in the way the tooling can be used with or without the protocols. And so, even in where we have modified versions of this tooling, like in Journeys, right, as a slight tangent, I've said this in these sessions, right, that undoubtedly issues are going to arise that need this type of models and consensus flow tooling to resolve, right? Because the tooling in itself, can get choppy, right? In terms of not knowing why dissent isn't really a used thing, as Haas mentioned earlier, and it's because of these protocols of consensus that will send an issue back before making it, trying to formalize it even. Right, the turtles won't even. It's not supposed to get that far. And before that, 9 times out of 10, I'm supposed to be really supposed to have a deliberation in this part of the flow. So, but yeah, thank you for the questions. It also lends itself to, what I was trying to articulate with the autonomous processes, right? So in the flow chart, you can see, and somebody is, can feel free to share this particular image if they'd like on the screen, but hopefully everybody can see it. Just one of the more recent images posted in the meeting chat. But yeah, it's the big exciting point around a lot of this is, and maybe a point of discussion too, is the streamlining effects. We just before Haas came back with us, we talked about the preliminary phases, where the bulk of consensus happens, and how you can almost see a shadow of that in the current tooling without the models. But in the models, you really start to see, how autonomous decision making in consensus, right, is being streamlined. It's being streamlined for the whole collective. The power is being distributed through consensus in that preliminary phase. But then there's also a streamlining of power distributed in the decision making. Because all